Welcome to another great show right here on IT Pro TV. You're watching the CompTIA IT Fundamentals for Exam FC0U61. I'm your host, Ronnie Wong, and today we're diving into the realm of Microsoft Windows. And here, of course, to help us, going to be our IT expert himself, Mr. Don Pezet. Don, welcome back to our show.
Thanks for having me back, Ronnie. And like you said, we're going to take a look at Microsoft Windows in this episode. If you've been watching the whole series, we actually just finished a show on operating systems, and we stayed fairly general, and we tried to talk about operating systems just as a generic type entity. But in this episode, we're going to dump all that generic stuff and focus right in on Microsoft Windows, which is the most popular operating system in the world. It is used by the bulk of business users and by most home users as well. So the odds are, if you're watching this show, you're probably watching from a machine running Microsoft Windows already. And if you're super familiar with it, great. But if you're not, this will be a chance for us to jump in and take a look at those features, how it functions, what it does, and what it is that kind of sets Windows apart from the other operating systems. Now, we are going to follow up with more episodes on Mac OS and Linux as well. But in this episode, we're going to take a grand tour through the world of Microsoft Windows.
All right, Don. So everybody wants to know this as we get started into our IT career. Why in the world is Microsoft Windows going to be the most popular one? So let's share a little bit of history of how it got there a little bit and help us to get started.
Sure. Windows has been around a long time. And in fact, it really wasn't the original operating system from Microsoft. The original operating system was called DOS, the disk operating system. And DOS was a command line based operating system that was designed to run on some of the old IBM PCs. And one of the things that made DOS so popular was that they didn't really care what hardware you ran it on. They supported a number of processors, and so you could buy a computer, you could buy DOS, and you could throw it on there. But DOS was just command line based. You just got a black screen with a command prompt, and that was it. You could run one program at a time. And if you wanted to run a second program, you had to close the first one and then open the second one. I mean, this is back in the floppy disk days. This is computers were not very powerful back then. So you had pretty limited functionality. Well, over the years, computers have become far more advanced, hardware has become much faster, and operating systems have developed quite a bit. In the 80s, Microsoft worked with IBM. Microsoft and IBM were teamed up, and they were working on an operating system called OS/2. And OS/2 had a graphical user interface they were working on. Now, the IBM and Microsoft partnership didn't last. It kind of split off. But Microsoft took the parts they were working on, and that became Microsoft Windows. Microsoft Windows was a graphical user interface that laid right on top of DOS. And that is what became the Windows that we run today. And now you can't go and buy DOS by itself. You buy Windows. And the old DOS system is actually just kind of a part, and I have to say kind of, because it's not actually DOS anymore. It's evolved so much. So when I go into a computer that's running Windows, here, if we look at my computer, this is what I see. I see a graphical user interface. I see icons, right? This is what came out of Microsoft's work with IBM and has now evolved into a whole new beast just over the years. But the olden days are still there, that if I really wanted to, I can fire up a command prompt and I can see what is effectively the old DOS type environment, where I get a command prompt and I can type commands and I can start to do work or whatever it is that I'm going to do. This is what life was like back in the 1980s, right? Well, now we're in, it's almost 2020, right? So time is flying by really fast, and we don't work in command line environments like this anymore. So the name Windows came from the idea of the graphical user interface. See how this command prompt is in a square, and I can move it around like this. And in fact, I can stick it over here on the side. I can launch a web browser. It's in its own little square, and I can kind of park it over the side. These are supposed to be like windows on a house. When you look at the front of a house, it's one big house, but there's all these different windows on it, right? And if I look in one window, I see the living room. And if I look in another window, I see the kitchen. And if I look in a third window, they call the police. So, it's kind of giving you these different views into that operating system. And more importantly, I'm running more than one program at the same time. I've got my web browser. I've got this command prompt. I've got where I'm browsing my file system. And I can do all these simultaneously. This is called multitasking. Microsoft Windows is a multitasking operating system. It's allowing the computer to do more than one thing at a time. I didn't have to close my web browser so that I could open a command prompt. I don't have to limit myself. In fact, even inside of one program, I can do multiple things. Like I might choose to browse several different sites. I need my news, right? So I'm going to pull up CNN.com, and then I can pull up FoxNews.com, and we can see how different they are. And we can start to do all these different things. Now, I'm not having to close out one program to go for another. I can do it all right here inside of one system. So that's part of the way that Microsoft Windows functions. It is heavily reliant on the graphical user interface. When you install Windows, it installs with the GUI. When you buy that laptop or that desktop, and most people have adjusted to this system. They've learned it, they're used to it. And so part of the reason why Windows is so popular is because it's just been around so long. Now, another reason why it's so popular is that you can buy Microsoft Windows by itself. If I go to a computer, a company that sells software, like Best Buy, right? So if I just go to bestbuy.com, and whoops, I guess I have to spell it right or it doesn't function. But if I go to bestbuy.com and I want to buy a copy of Microsoft Windows, I can come in here and do a search for Microsoft Windows. After I get past their survey, and I'll be able to find that software that I can buy right there. I can buy a copy of Microsoft Windows 10 Home Edition for $100, right? I could buy my own hardware, whatever I wanted, right? As long as it's compatible hardware, then I can install Windows on it. So they give me the flexibility of picking the hardware that I want. Other vendors don't do that. For example, Apple. If I wanted to buy Apple's Mac OS, if I come in here and search for Apple Mac OS, I'm not going to find just the software. Apple doesn't sell it that way. If you want Mac OS, you have to buy their hardware, and their hardware comes with Mac OS on it, right? That limits a company. That limits an organization. If I want a computer and I want Mac OS, I have to buy an Apple Mac. I have to. That's the only way to get it. But if I want Microsoft Windows, I can buy hardware from Dell, HP, Acer, Lenovo, LG, Sony, any number of companies. They all make computers that run Microsoft Windows. And that flexibility, that ability for us to basically just pick our hardware and remain flexible like that makes Windows very popular and very common. And so when you get into the business world, businesses like to be able to negotiate out bulk pricing agreements and purchase computers at a lower price. And they can do that with generic hardware that they can't do with Apple. And so that's why we see Microsoft Windows so well accepted. And for software developers, when they write a program, they're going to write a program for the most popular operating systems first. And so we're in this kind of, I don't want to call it a rut, but more like a habit. This habit where software developers will develop for Windows first, and then they'll evaluate and say, oh, maybe I'll release this for Mac OS also, and kind of add it in afterwards. But for most businesses, the software they run requires Microsoft Windows, and that's why we see it as popular as it is.
All right, Don. So speaking of this idea of what you're talking about, where we have these different icons and we can point and click on things, what are some of the other features that we need to know about in terms of just us interacting with the operating system?
Well, at the heart of an operating system is something called a kernel. The kernel is an application, a very small application. It's the very first program that runs when the operating system is launched, and it's what's actually making the operating system drive. It's what's doing all of the real work. But that kernel, we don't see it as a person because it's all hidden behind this user interface, right? So the user interface is how we're interacting with that kernel. And the UI in Microsoft Windows is called Explorer. Now, don't confuse that with the web browser. Microsoft has a web browser called Internet Explorer. Well, Microsoft actually has two web browsers, right? They have Microsoft Edge and Internet Explorer, right? Those are their two browsers. Well, Internet Explorer hasn't always been around, but ever since the first version of Windows, we've had the Explorer type interface. Well, actually, that's not even true because in the beginning it was one called Package Manager, Presentation Manager, which then changed and became Explorer in Windows 95. So starting Windows 95, we had Explorer. And the Explorer interface is designed to make it easy for you to access things on your system. So when I look at my screen, I'm looking at Explorer, right? Not Internet Explorer, just plain old Explorer. And it's giving me a couple of pieces that are really useful. First, icons on my desktop, right? For things that I run constantly and frequently, I can put icons on the desktop. I see an icon right here from Microsoft Edge, so I can launch that if I need it, and there I'll have it available to me, right? I could put other icons or documents, papers that I'm working on, spreadsheets, I can put them on my desktop. This is designed to replicate your actual physical desk and how you might have papers that you're working on laying there. Now they'd be laying right here. Then I have my taskbar down here at the bottom. And the taskbar is how we run most programs or how we access other areas of the system. You'll see a start button on the left side. And the start button, if I click that, brings up a start menu. Now, your start menu might look different than mine. Mine's a clean install, so there's not much going on here. On a newer install, a lot of times you'll see additional buttons and icons over here on the side for some of their active applications. So you'll see all sorts of things like little news blurbs and other software. I've removed that from mine. But otherwise, you'll see a list of all the programs on your system. And you can launch them and get in and access. You've also got search functionality right here that you can type in and do a search. You can search for applications. You can search for documents. You can even search the web. If I want to find out how the NHL draft went, I can come in and just type NHL draft. And here we go. It reaches out. It finds the information. I can see the NHL draft and who went first, right? So that's all being pulled, not from my computer. That's coming from the internet now. That search is very, very dynamic. In Microsoft Windows, that search is powered by a system called Cortana. Cortana is designed to be easy to use. It's designed to help you find information on your system as well as find information on the internet. And it's designed to be interact with via voice. So notice the little microphone icon right there, that I could hit that and I could ask Cortana to do things. And I haven't done the voice programming on mine because it needs to be trained to your voice. That and I kind of hate talking to computers. It's a pet peeve of mine. So I'll tell it that I'm not going to do that. But anyhow, so we can configure that, get it set up, and communicate. We can also browse our file system. This is probably the number one task of most operating systems, is they need to give you access to your files. So every operating system has some kind of file system browser. And an Explorer, let me just show you here. If I float my mouse over this folder icon, you'll see it's called File Explorer, right? This Explorer term is kind of spread all through Windows. And if I launch that, I'll see my file system. It starts by showing me my frequent stuff, files and folders that I've used recently. But on the left here, I can go to this PC, and I can browse to my hard drive. Here's my C drive, and I can browse and start accessing files there. I can go to my own documents folder, and I can see documents that I've got, and I can open those documents. Now, here's another thing that an operating system does. It says, if you want to open up a program, that's great, right? You just run the program. I can double-click on Edge, and it'll launch it. But here I've got a document. I've got a resume, right? If I want to open this resume, the resume is a document. I need a program to open it. Well, the operating system will try and keep track of what programs can be used to open what documents. So all I have to do is double click on this resume and it'll open up in a word processor. In this case, it's using Microsoft WordPad. So it's launching here. Now I can come in and see what we've got and other information here. I didn't have to realize what program it was. It took care of that for me. Operating systems are trying to make things easier. In this case, Explorer does a fine job of that. Now, when we're browsing through here, a lot of what's going on behind the scenes is hidden from us because it's super complex, right? So for example, I'm browsing my file system. The file system here it's storing ones and zeros, data bits on a hard drive. And how did it find that data? How did it figure out where it was and all that good stuff? Well, there's actually a whole file system that's a part of Windows called NTFS. That's the New Technology File System. And NTFS is keeping track of where my files are and what permissions are on them. But I don't see any of that from here. In fact, I had to dig a good bit to find it. If I right-click on this computer or this PC and I choose Manage, it's going to bring up a computer management screen. And in here, I can go to Disk Management, and I'll see my disks, and I can learn a little bit more about them. So like I see my C drive here, and up top, I can see that my C drive has the NTFS file system on it. And NTFS is what's giving me the ability to locate these files quickly, store them in a way that we know will maintain integrity so the files don't degrade over time. If I put a file there today, it'll be the same exact file a year from now or 5 years from now, unless I choose to modify it. But it also gives us advanced functions, like I can do encryption and compression. If I take that resume and I pull up its properties, inside of the properties for that, I can go to Advanced, and right here, you see I can turn on compression and encryption. I say and. I think you can only do one or the other. I don't think it'll let you do, yeah, it won't let you do both. But I can choose to encrypt it or to compress it, and that's all being done by the file system. When I compress it, that file is going to get smaller on the disk. It'll take less room. But I don't see that. As a user, I just see that icon. And I click on it, and it opens, and there's my resume. I have no idea that it was compressed, right? That's what operating systems do. They hide complexity. NTFS and Explorer and the Microsoft Windows kernel, they all had to know about that encryption or compression. I didn't. It just took care of it, and I get it the information, and there it is.
All right, so Don, you were talking about this idea when you showed us in disk management. It said C colon and then a backslash, I believe is what it said. Is there a reason why C and do all those other characters mean anything?
Sure, yeah. So you might have more than one drive on your system. When you buy a computer, a lot of times they just have one hard drive, right? My laptop has one hard drive. And so Microsoft gives them a drive letter so that you know how to access it, right? A through Z, 26 letters. Very, very few people have more than 26 drives. Most people only have one, so 26 is more than enough, so that you can browse and access the disk. Now, it is a little weird that it starts at C, that my C drive, what happened to A and B? Well, in the olden days, we had floppy disks. And most systems in the early days only had one floppy disk, and that was your A drive. But there was a period of time where you had 5¼ inch and 3½ inch drives, and a lot of computers started having two drives, and that was A and B. So with hard drives, what we have today, those started with C. It's just a little bit of history that's there. But as you add more drives, there'll be D and E and F. A and B are largely unused these days, but you could, in theory, change the drive letter and switch it to A if you wanted. It's best to leave it at C because that's kind of the default of most computer systems. Microsoft is the only operating system that uses drive letters to reference a disk. When we do Linux and Mac OS and our other shows, you'll see they use different ways of referencing the disks. But yeah, that's where that drive letter comes from. And you don't even really see it anymore because they give you this quick access to jump right to your folders. You have to go to this PC before you even start to see the drive letters. And so I've got my hard drive as C. I've got a DVD drive here that's D. It's not D for DVD. It's just that's the next letter after C. So that's why it's showing up there.
All right, so Don, as we start taking a look, it looks like that there's some general functionality built into the operating system itself. But what if I needed something a little bit more directed at what we needed? How do I get an application onto the system itself?
All right, that's another key piece of Microsoft Windows is that the operating system has some good software built into it, but it's not the greatest. Usually we're going to have software we want. There's things that I want to do. So for example, I use a text editor called Sublime Text. There's text editing built right into Windows, right? So it comes with Notepad. So I could come in here and launch Notepad, and I could start writing text, and there we go. It works, right? But I have certain like search and replace and regular expressions and other crazy things that I like to use that Notepad doesn't do. It gives me the basics, like the was it the lowest common denominator, like the minimum amount of activity that any average user would need. That's what it gives me. They actually give me another one if we use WordPad instead. It's a little more advanced, right? Look, I can do fonts and formatting and a little bit more fancy, but it still doesn't have some of the features that I want. So what I can do is I can go out to the internet or wherever, and I can find a text editor that meets my needs, and I can download it and install it on top of Windows. Windows gives us the ability to install software and uninstall software. So if I were to browse out to the internet, launch a web browser here, and go to sublimetext.com, I could go to their website, and I could download the software. They've got it right here on the website. I can just download it. It's a simple file. And once you download it, it's not actually installed on your system. So I've downloaded that file. It's sitting right here. This is a setup file. And I can run that setup file, and it will install the software onto my system. And once it's installed, it'll be ready to run. Now, when I run this, it's going to be copying these files to my C drive, where my operating system and other applications are stored. Now, Windows is trying to make sure that this is legitimate software. And so it's warning me. It's saying, are you sure you want to install this? Right? If this is a virus, I'm going to say, no, I didn't want to run that. But in this case, it's software that I downloaded, I trust. And so I can say, yes, I want to install it. And now it's going to walk me through the installer. And most installers are pretty simple. You're just clicking next a few times. But see how it's asking where to install it. C:/program files. It's putting it on my C drive in a folder called Sublime Text 3. That's where it's going to install to. And if I just let that finish, it's going to install. Now, when it's done, how do I run that software? Well, if I look at my computer, I don't see Sublime Text, do I? Well, Microsoft Windows tracks when software is installed, and it's added right here to my start menu. There it is, right? And I can choose to make a copy of that and stick it on my desktop, just like Microsoft Edge, or I could add it to my taskbar down here. It's up to me how I want that to be. But anytime I want to run Sublime Text, I can find it right here under my Start button or Start menu. I can click it, and it runs. Here I am. I'm in Sublime Text. I can start text editing to my heart's desire, and it's the software that I wanted, right? I'm not kind of held to a single piece. Being able to install software is really important to making the computer work the way that you want it to work. Now, if I want to uninstall the software, if I want to get rid of it, well, I could delete this icon, but that doesn't actually uninstall the software. The software is still there, right? So Windows tracks when the software is installed, all the little pieces that it creates, the files that it copies, and it gives me a way to do software removal. I can take the software back off again. When we dive into our settings in Windows, right, if I hit my Start menu and I go to Settings, you'll see all sorts of settings in here for updating how the system functions, changing settings, and other things. In here, I can find apps. Uninstall is one of the options, also my default apps and other things. But I can click on apps, and in here, I can start to see all the applications that are installed on my machine. There's a lot. A lot of these came with Windows. I didn't install them. But here's Sublime Text I did install. And so I can find that one. I can hit uninstall, and it's going to remove that from my system. So Windows is giving me that ability to uninstall the software and take it out. And once I do that, it's going to run through that process. It's going to uninstall the software, and now it's actually gone. If I try and run Sublime Text, it's not there anymore. If I do a search, it's finding the installer because I still have the install file, but the actual software is gone and it's not available. Even if I put that icon back, the icon that was on my desktop, if I put that back, there it is. That's just an icon. If I run it, it can't find the program. The program is actually gone, and so it offers to delete the icon for me, and now it's out of there. So being able to install and uninstall software is kind of a key piece of any operating system. Microsoft Windows just makes it really easy.
All right, Don, as we continue on and take a look at the idea of the operating system here, when you close out of an application, I've seen this at times where it doesn't really seem like it's actually closed out. Is there any place I can go and check and figure out whether or not the application has truly been closed?
Absolutely. This is a multitasking operating system. It can do more than one thing at a time, and sometimes I forget. Like I might run Internet Explorer, and I might run WordPad and any other number of programs, and as I'm running each of them, they're all doing various things, right? But I don't necessarily see the juggling act that's going on behind the scenes. Well, down here in my taskbar, I can see which programs are running. I see this little line under my E that lets me know Microsoft Edge is running. And I see a line under this A here, which is letting me know that WordPad is running. And if I float my mouse over them, I see a preview of what that application looks like. So I don't have to bring it to the foreground. It can stay in the background and I can see what it looks like. And these are actually live, which is kind of a cool thing. If you go to, here, I'll go to YouTube. And if we go to YouTube or somewhere and we play a video, let's see if we can find like an IT Pro TV video. If we play a video, it'll start playing in the background. And so that's going on right here inside of the actual application, right? If I minimize this and I float my mouse over that E down at the bottom, it'll actually, I guess because I minimized it, it stopped playing. If I don't have it minimized and I float over, it'll actually keep that, there you can kind of see it. See how that little preview is actually moving along with it. It's pretty slick. But sometimes applications run in the background and they're kind of hidden and we don't see them, right? For that, you have what's called your task manager. If I right click on my taskbar down here at the bottom, I'll see a bunch of options, one of which is task manager. And if I go into the task manager, I'll see a list of all the programs that are running. I can see Microsoft Edge and the Microsoft Windows WordPad application they're running. And if I go to more details, I can see even more about them, including how much CPU, how much memory and disk access, how much resources they're taking away from my system. This is all a part of the task management that Windows is doing all the time. It's hidden from us normally. We don't see it. An average end user doesn't need to see this. But if you're an IT technician and a computer is running slow, you might want to know why. You can go into the task manager and you can see which program is making this computer run slow. And you can figure it out. Microsoft Edge for me right now is consuming about 10% of my CPU, 7 to 10%. And that's because it's playing a video. But that's not monopolizing my system. I'm still able to function. If my system were running really slow and I came in here and Edge was at 100% of my CPU, I would know, there's my problem. I need to kill off that task or whatever to take care of that. We have to be aware of tasks because there's more than one way they can run. They can run by me double-clicking on them, But there's also things like scheduled tasks, tasks that run at a certain time, right? There might be a task that runs at 3 a.m. or 1 p.m. I don't run it. The system runs it and it launches. We would see those here in the task manager. You also have what are called services. Services, there are all these background processes. There's 36 other programs running on here that I didn't run. The computer ran them. They're providing some kind of a service. Like here, I've got the anti-malware service. That's scanning for viruses on my system and stopping me from getting infected. I've got the Bonjour service. That's helping me locate Apple computers on the network. And as you keep looking down the list, you'll find all sorts of services like that. The Spooler subsystem, that's helping me send print jobs to a printer, right? These are services that run in the background, and they can make your system run slow sometimes as well, but normally they're providing some kind of a service, and they're sitting there doing nothing until you need that service. See how all these are at 0% CPU? They're not hurting my system at all. They're just sitting there waiting for me to get in and actually do something, and then they'll come in and interact and start to consume resources. So all of that is going on in the background.
All right, Don, there's also other things that end up happening, like the idea that I have multiple people using the same computer. What do we need to do to help us to manage that a little bit more?
Oh, sure. So Microsoft Windows is a network operating system that is fully secured. So it has a full capability of doing multiple user accounts and file permissions and isolating data from one user versus another. So you can set up permissions and controls the way that you need it, right? Having more than one user account on a system is really handy. If you just have one account, I sit down, I write a document, I get up and I walk away, Ronnie sits down, and now he's got access to my documents. All right, well, if it's a home computer or family, you might not care about that. But in a work environment, that's normally a problem. So we need more than one user account to prevent that. So I can come in here and I can define multiple user accounts. If I go into my settings, you'll find an accounts section. And right now I've got one account, an account for me. And so when I come in here, I see Don Pizzette, and there we go, there's my information. But I can create more than one account so that other people could log in. So if I want Ronnie to have an account or other people, I can come in and start to define that. And so you'll see family and other people down here, and I can add someone else to this PC. So I'm going to come in and add an account for Ronnie. And that way when he logs in, he'll see his documents, and when I log in, I'll see my documents, and that we don't have kind of like conflict and overview or overlap between our systems. We can maintain our privacy, but we can also have our own personal settings as well. So mainly here, it could be something as simple as a wallpaper. Maybe I really like that blue smoky wallpaper that Microsoft uses by default, okay? But Ronnie comes along and he says, man, I hate that wallpaper. It's just annoying. I want to set it to something different, okay? Well, oh shoot, it's gonna make me do security questions and all that. Well, we'll just make some stuff up here. It's asking for security questions so that if he forgets his password, Ronnie, your childhood nickname is Bob.
Okay.
Just so you know, just so that if he forgets his password, he can reset it and get back in there. But now what I've done is I've effectively created another account for Ronnie right here, and he can log in. And when he logs in, he can set his own wallpaper, his own settings. He can set things the way that he wants and get it customized and personalized to him, and it's not going to overlap with me. When I log in as Ronnie here for the first time, see how it's doing this? We're getting everything ready for you. It's creating a whole new environment just for Ronnie. And so when he sets the Backstreet Boys as his wallpaper or whatever,
of course,
you're probably more of an NSYNC man. So once it gets that set, I can then log in and I can have my Britney Spears wallpaper and it'll be fine. Each of us get our own experience. We have our documents, we have our settings. Everything is laid out and personalized. That user management is really important, and that wasn't always there. In the early versions of Windows, you didn't have user accounts. Everybody logged in as the same account, if they logged in at all. Most systems just automatically logged in. Computers have come a long way since then. So that's kind of a key piece of an operating system like Microsoft Windows.
All right, Don. Well, thank you again for helping us understand more about the idea of Microsoft Windows. There's a lot for you to explore if you haven't actually been taking a look at it from the standpoint of what you're going to see as an IT support technician as well, and as you actually start supporting other users too. Now, Don, once again, I'm going to give you the last word on the subject. What do we have here?
All right, we have just scraped the tip of the iceberg as far as Windows goes. Windows is a very, very powerful operating system, and when you use it at home versus using it at work, it can be very, very different. So don't think that this was a all-inclusive tour of everything that Windows can do. It's very powerful. So we just wanted to give you a quick overview so that you could see it. If you want to learn more about Windows, well, we're going to continue to explore software functionality here in IT Fundamentals. But in the CompTIA A+ certification, we really tackle a good bit of what Windows can do. And in some of the Microsoft MTA type certifications, you can learn a heck of a lot more about Microsoft Windows. It is the most popular operating system on the planet. So if you're looking into an IT career, this is an operating system that's not really optional for you to learn. You need to know how Microsoft Windows functions and how it works because you will be exposed to it. It's pretty much a given.
Some great advice there, Don, as we continue to move forward through this series. And also, thank you for joining us today. Signing off for IT Pro TV, I'm your host, Ronnie Wong.
And I'm Don Pizzette.
Stay tuned right here for more of the CompTIA IT Fundamentals Show coming your way.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.